Hey there, welcome to the Ten Commandments Bible Study. This is day 14, a false witness. We're going to talk about the ninth commandment today. And, of course, the ninth commandment is probably one of the first things that we learn to break. As children, I mean. You know, a child learns early how to calculate whether or not to be honest. It's just one of the first things we learn to do. And so we come to the ninth commandment today, and the Catechism asks us the question, what is the ninth commandment? And the ninth commandment is, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. It's Exodus chapter 20, verse 16. So what is required in the ninth commandment? Well, the ninth commandment requires the maintaining and promoting of truth between man and of our own and our neighbor's good name, especially in witness bearing. All right, now you'll notice three things there. First of all, we have the maintaining and promoting. This is not unlike what we've seen before in the commandments, right? We've been maintaining and promoting and preserving all along through these required sections. But this time it's about truth. So maintaining and promoting truth, and then we have the three things. Between man, and of our own, and of our neighbor's good name. So truth between men, protection of our own good name, and the protection of our neighbor's good name, especially in witness bearing. That's important. So how do we speak truth to our neighbor? Well, let's look at Zechariah chapter 8, verse 16. These are the things that you shall do. Speak you every man truth to his neighbor. Execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. All right, the gate there is the gate of the city. In ancient cities that were built with walls, they had a gate system that people would go in and out of. And there were usually 2 or 3 chambers to the gate system to these ancient cities. And inside those chambers, those gate chambers, the elders of the city would sit. If it was a royal city, sometimes the king would sit there with the elders, and or his representative would be there. And that served as the court. So if you had a case that needed to be judged or adjudicated, you could go to the gate city, find the elders, present your cause, and if you did that, then what's the most important thing in that setting? You're in the court, you're in the gate, you're before the judge or the elders. What's the most important thing to do? The most important thing to do there is to speak truth, right? Because our court system depends solely on truth. We must tell truth. And so here in Zechariah, the things that you shall do, speak you every man truth to his neighbor. That's the first condition. Truth between man and man. And where do we find that most often? We want to find that most often in our courts so that we can adjudicate rightly. Now, you'll notice it says, execute judgment and truth in your gates. And I ask the question, is it possible to maintain truth? I think it is, but we have to be willing to do it. And the church has to be the vanguard in this regard. We must be the ones that are speaking truth. We must be the ones that are not lying, but the ones that are telling the truth about whatever situation happens to be. How can you promote truth? That's the next question. Think about that for a moment. How can you promote truth just in your everyday life? Between you and your neighbor, between you and the stranger that you meet. How do you promote truth? I think one answer to that is, I hope you've already written your answer down, but I hope one answer to that is that you're telling truth. Truth begets truth. So the more we engage in truth-telling, the more we promote truth in ourselves and in others. And then I have here our witnesses on the line, 1 Peter 3:16. Peter is writing to the churches that are scattered, and he says, having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you as of evildoers, they may be ashamed and falsely accuse your good conversation in Christ. So having a good conscience speaks back to that second piece in the Catechism, our own good name. So I have a good conscience. They speak of me as an evildoer, but they're ashamed when they find out my good conversation. That is a lifestyle in keeping with truth, and it's a conversation in Christ. So a Christ-like walk always equates to a truthful life. And then Acts chapter 25, verse 10, Paul standing at Caesar's judgment seat. And I ask the question, what happens to the Christian witness if they besmirch their reputation by lying? What happens? Well, it falls apart, doesn't it? And it dishonors Christ, doesn't it? And it dishonors the church, doesn't it? And it dishonors my own good name. So think about that for a minute. The Christian witness, what happens? And then taking right judgment is at stake. Read Proverbs 14:5. A faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. And then verse 25 in that same chapter. A true witness delivers souls, but a deceitful witness speaks lies. And here I want to ask the question, we've already talked about this in the matter of judicial things, but I want to kind of spread that out a little bit now and think about how a community is affected when judgments are based on lies. What happens to the community? Because usually when judgments are passed down in a court, they come and have an effect on the larger community. So if a judgment in a court is based on a lie, then what happens to the community that's affected by that? Now we have the forbidden question in the ninth commandment. The ninth commandment forbids whatsoever is prejudicial to truth or injurious to our own or our neighbor's good name. Whatsoever is prejudicial or injurious. Truth is a foundation to order. You know that, and I know that. Look at Romans chapter 13, verse 3. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Will you then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and you shall have praise of the same. Now I ask a kind of a funny question here. How is the church affected when its members do not tell the truth? You say to me, wait a minute, Pastor, what are we talking about here? Well, Paul's writing this letter to the Romans, to the church at Rome. And isn't it fascinating that he has to address this issue? Rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Is it possible that some Christians were involved in evil works? Will you then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and you shall have praise of the same. Is it possible that the church was not telling the truth about some things? Perhaps the church was standing before the court and giving something other than truth. In that case, how is the church affected when its members do not tell the truth? I can't think of anything good there, can you? Write your answer down to that question. Our integrity and our neighbor's good name then is next. Read Psalm 15, 1 through 3. Now, on your sheet, I just have verse 3 recorded, but I didn't have time, or didn't have space, actually, to put all three verses. I want you to read all three. Let me go over here in my Bible and take a look at that. Lord, who shall abide in your tabernacle? Who shall dwell in your holy hill? He that walks uprightly and works righteousness and speaks truth in his heart. He that backbites not with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor takes up a reproach against his neighbor. You'll notice what's in focus here is the tongue. So the man who is abiding with the Lord does these things. He walks uprightly, works righteousness, and speaks truth. So that's an important designation of the person in Christ. He doesn't backbite. He doesn't do evil. He doesn't take up a reproach against his neighbor. All of these things, speaking truth, backbiting, doing evil, taking up a reproach, are artifacts of the tongue. So how is the tongue to be used? Especially when it comes to our neighbor. We're to tell them the truth. Always the truth. Never to lie. No, we're to make sure that we're walking with Christ and representing him, because what would he do? He would tell them the truth too. Okay, then I have the consider question here, and I ask you to think about what you can do today to lay the groundwork for future truth-telling. What can be done to restore yours or your neighbor's good name? I want to meditate on that for a moment and write down your response. And then for our meditation today, it's the ninth commandment with what is required. So write down the ninth commandment on a card or a slip of paper, and then also write down the answer to what is required. The ninth commandment requires maintaining and promoting and so forth. Then as you go about your day today, I want you to take a moment, look at those, read those to yourself, rehearse the words, mutter them to yourself, think about them, that let these words enrich your day today. All right, so tomorrow we'll do day 15. I'll see you then on the Ten Commandments Bible Study.